Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I have a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
And today is episode 196 of Podcast 2 for 1, youtube.com/2for1 studios. Guys, it's the best place to consume all the content. If you didn't know, listeners, let's be honest, you probably did not. We are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Sherwood, Arkansas. There they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest purchases throughout the year.
Kapow.
Daniel 296, we are talking Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Amazon Prime.
Ooh, yeah.
And I can tell you right now, a year ago, if they said that the show is coming out, with the added of Donald Glover, I might have been like, oh, okay. But overall, I was kind of like, all right. Like, I don't really anticipate ever talking about this with anybody ever at any point in my life. But that first trailer dropped, and then more interestingly, we started kind of talking amongst ourselves. We started watching it, and it's not really like the trailer at all in a lot of great ways. And I can say it's a pretty incredible season of television overall, and very surprising. So give me your initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'm the same way with you. I remember watching bits and pieces of the original, the Angelina Jolie Brad Pitt movie. But I remember the pieces that I watching just were kind of, it was like just an action movie, kind of thing. It didn't really catch me at all, it didn't really make an impression. And so I was like you coming into it. I just was like, okay, I'm probably always going to try something Donald Glover is at this point. He just has never really let me down with his projects. Catherine and I are like in season 3 of Atlanta, and it's just like, it's like Atlanta becomes like Twilight Zone-esque in season 3 and 4. It's wild. Like you're watching these episodes, you're like, what the fuck is going on with this? And then it'll be like all happening in a character's head or something like that. You know what I mean? And it's like, so it's just getting out there, which I love, because to me, it's just Donald Glover's just like doing whatever the fuck he wants, and like just whatever comes to his brain, he's making shit about it. But yeah, I was really impressed with this show. To me, it felt very different than like really anything else on TV right now. And I think, when we were talking about it earlier, not today, but earlier, I think you hit the nail on the head of saying it did what it should have done, which is the show is not about spies or what it's like to be a spy or spy missions or any of that. That's just the setting. That's just the background. That's just what's going on in the back. What the show is about is their relationship. And it's essentially like a rom-com, like a rom-com with maybe a little more drama in there. That is just, the character chemistry is just perfect. Like it's wild how well they fit, how well they acted off each other. You could tell there was a lot of improv, I felt like, in the show, but you didn't. Sometimes when you get a show with a lot of improv, you can tell because the lines aren't as strong, almost, where you're like, and they're talking over each other maybe, and you're like, this doesn't feel like it was scripted. This feels like they were just kind of doing an improv scene. It didn't have any of that in it as the show. It just had this chemistry where they were just going back and forth in a way that you were like, they're just in the moment, and like they're ad-libbing a bit, but it works perfectly.
Well, you may know better than me, but my initial instinct is that this is not ad-libbed at all. It feels too precise to be.
Well, and maybe it's not. I think mainly just because you can really tell the chemistry these two had on set with each other. And when I say ad-libbed, I don't think they weren't. I think everything was scripted. I don't know how. I even saw a little thing where it was like, script and scene side by side. It was the fight they have in the woods. Remember that one, like the big fight they have? It's really dramatic and good. And it was like, they did deviate from the script, but the same ideas were spoken, kind of thing. Gotcha. Right? And so I think there was ad lib in like just the sense of like, they both knew the script, but they both know what the point of the scene is, and they're just going to be their characters and just kind of work off the energy that's in the room. You know what I mean? And so I think to me that part is just, it's like they did talk over each other a lot, but in a way that felt realistic to conversations, not in the way that you sometimes get in these improv things where it's like everyone's talking over each other. No one's kind of giving each other space to say the good lines or anything. Anyway, all that to say is fantastic show. Didn't expect to love it as much as I did. And I think it is somewhat of a slow burn. Like the first couple episodes, like this is great, but by the end of the show, I was like, this is fantastic. This is
Yeah.
really, really good. So
When
I'd
it-
love to
when
hear
it
more
all
of your thoughts.
Well, when it all ended, and it ends in a pretty good cliffhanger kind of way. It ends
Yeah.
in a place that I anticipated from the very first episode. And Kimberly was kind of like, "That's it," and I was like, "Yeah," and I was like, it's strangely hasn't even been picked up yet, and it's got decent reviews and stuff, but it's not. No one's talking about it,
Mm, mm,
At least no one that I see talking about it. I think it's pretty incredible. But I do want to say. I think maybe part of the issue with that is the marketing of it
mm,
because I was talking to Jordan Faulkner because
mm.
he also loves it. He's gushing over it.
Yeah.
And the opening title, like the title the title card, um, it feels different. It feels artsy.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like, it's just a plain white or maybe whatever beige
Mm,
background with like a pool of light, but like the text alone is not something that screams action movie.
yeah.
But then you go and look at the trailer, or you just go look at the Amazon Prime home page for it. The
Mm,
font is different. The font is like an action movie.
mm.
The
Oh
font
wow.
looks like
Yeah.
the old school Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of stuff. And
Right.
to be fair, I remember watching that movie coming out, and I remember enjoying it. Like at the time, they were really big stars at the time, right?
Yeah,
And
they were huge. They were married at the time too, I
I
think.
think
Right?
they were
They were
married.
like
Yeah,
Hollywood's
yeah,
couple, the golden
yeah.
like Hollywood couple at the time.
I
Yeah.
remember us renting it, I believe, on DVD, and I remember us really liking it, and I've seen it, bits and pieces here and there, and I probably a couple times overall. But I think there's a marketing issue. I think some people who are turning
Yeah.
it on and thinking I'm gonna get this action movie, it's not that, and
Yeah.
and it's better for it because when the action does hit, you're like, because it's just what I've been saying for so long, and I something I just truly believe is that action doesn't. There's cases where it's okay, where it works. Like we talk within Bruce with Infinity War when
Sure.
something is so fucking cool it doesn't matter.
I mean, that's what I would say is that's you're describing the Fast and Furious franchise essentially,
Sure. Well,
right? Just
yeah.
ridiculous stunts, like just going over the top with the next movie with whatever the action set piece was last time. Now it's bigger. Now it's more
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I mean, I mean, yes, yes. Um, I would argue for that's a little different because I do care about those characters because I've been with
Sure.
them so
Sure.
long.
Fair.
But I think of more something like I don't know, just a typical action movie
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it's like, well, I just think any
I mean, even
regular action movie.
John Wick to an extent, like I like those movies a lot, but there is part of me that wants a little bit more heart and or like a little bit more character development or a little bit more like getting to know John or something like that. Like,
Well, the first one is
you know,
perfect. The first one's
the
perfect in
first one's
terms
perfect. You're
of
right.
what you're talking about. And the fact we're getting on a tangent of action movies now, where the first one is all you need to know about
Yeah.
that man is that he lost his wife and then
Yeah.
someone killed his dog, and that dog represented his wife.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so that's all you need for that first one. And when you start getting into the second, third, and fourth one, it's really just the same story as that one. You're just peeling back the layers of the world.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of look at those four movies as one movie almost because they're happening
Yeah.
literally
Sure.
after one, like they're happening the frame after the
The
last one.
events of the last movie is exactly what sets up the next movie every time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so in those cases, you're also going to those movies for
You're right.
the action,
You're
right?
right.
You're going for those things. So, but to say all that, to rewind, is that most action sequences do not work because you don't care about the people involved in them. And so
Right.
you have to have those characters established. You have to have that's why Game of Thrones is so
Yeah.
that's why they kind of nailed a certain thing and kind of did it in a more extreme way than everyone else is that they didn't care about killing off their characters. And why that's important is because you cared about those characters.
Yeah.
There were some characters that just showed up and died immediately, but you kind of were always afraid of what could happen at any moment because they made you care about them and it made the
Yeah.
stakes higher. And
Yes.
so action is more relevant when the stakes are higher, and they're only higher when you care about the relationships
Yes.
that could be
Yes.
destroyed because of the
Yes.
action.
Yes.
So that's my master class real quick on action, Daniel.
Yes. I completely agree with you.
Yes. And again, and I would, and even just to go back even more, I would argue on I mentioned Infinity War and Thor, and I think our listeners don't know, I'm talking specifically about Thor showing up and then, in
Yeah.
Wakanda, Bruce had an issue with that because why isn't Thor, fighting whatever and, fighting Thanos at
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
moment? And I'm arguing that we've and my argument in that was that we had 10 years to build up with these
Yeah.
characters, and you
Yeah.
can let things breathe sometimes because we care about the
Yeah.
10 years of our life wrapped up in these movies. So
Absolutely.
so anyway,
Absolutely.
that's how you get away with that. You care about seeing Groot and Rocket and Thor
Yes.
at
Yes.
Wakanda. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
you care about that as a fan. You care about
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So anyway, yes, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I think here's an interesting nugget for you. I found this out at the end of the show.
Hmm.
Was that originally Phoebe Waller-Bridge was cast as
Yep. Yep.
the female, which our
She's hot right
listeners,
now. She's big.
she's hot, yeah, yeah, and she was in Indiana Jones: Dial of Destiny,
She
and
made
that
her
fell
fame on
Fleabag,
Fleabag. Yeah, my
which I've
wife my
never
wife's seen it.
seen.
I've never seen it. She said it's great. She loved it.
Everyone says it's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. Did
Um,
you see some of the quotes from Donald about that? Because they kind of addressed that in the press tour
really?
after.
No. What'd
Yeah,
you
so
say?
he was saying that. I mean, very very polite, but essentially she left because of creative differences, right? It was, and what he said was, what he attributed to was, she's from Britain, and in Britain they don't do writers' rooms really, is what he was saying. Like for TV shows in Britain, they don't
Interesting.
do that. You have she made Fleabag. She was like the writer, the producer. She was like in charge of the show, right? And so I think what he was kind of indicating is that like trying to do that in a more team environment was difficult. Like, what it sounds like to me is like she wanted it her way and she wasn't really willing to play ball to a degree to like come to an
Well,
agreement, right?
there's a few gags and jokes in there that play on both their races.
Yes,
And in the show as it is, and I'm glad that I'm not a huge Phoebe Waller-Bridge fan
she's
personally.
I think she
She's
does good in
fine.
the roles she is in, but I think she only can do certain roles.
Yeah, and maybe also I'm attributing to some of that to Doll of Destiny.
And yeah,
Um,
just general feelings about that movie.
yeah, so
Yeah,
but I think who they did cast, I don't know her name, I should. Um,
she's
but
fantastic.
that's a way better dynamic. It just feels better in every aspect to me. And so,
Absolutely.
and again, I like the uh the willingness to go like to some of the
Yeah,
cultural
yeah,
differences. And I
yeah.
feel like it's I don't know, I feel like it's more interesting
Right.
black and Asian versus black and someone who's British,
Sure.
personally.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you. I thought I want to look up her name because, and I don't want to, she was great and she deserves to have her name said.
Absolutely.
Maya Erskine.
Mhm.
She was so good. She felt like such a normal person, like
That's
such a real
yeah.
person, like you went to college with, like people like that, and they're
Yeah.
and even like to a degree I think she somewhat fits better than Donald Glover because she looks so normal and plain. Not to say like she's cute, but she's not like supermodel type person. She's not Angelina Jolie, right? She's not like sex icon type of actor, type of body. Donald is a little more than her just because he's so ripped in this show and has like such a clean beard. Like when they're talking about him being awkward and like not having friends, you're like, I can believe it because Donald's such a good actor, but like he looks like someone would be like all over him. Like people would just be gravitating
100%.
towards like he looks like
Yeah.
like a sex icon to a degree. But he's
well,
so
real quick.
good. Donald Glover is so good at playing a weird, awkward, weird person. Like there's so many lines and stuff where I'm like, that felt like Troy a little bit, where he's like just awkward and like not able to be like as cool as he wants to be. Like
Yeah.
he does a good job playing a person that wants to be cool but isn't quite cool.
Well, I wouldn't get into that, but I do want to say, just backing up, I said those exact same things to Kimberly a couple times. I said this is so the dialogue and the way things are kind of presented, the character interactions, they feel so real.
Yes.
It's like the thing you talk about when we're writing, like you want dialogue that feels like it's not scripted or it feels like it's not just it
Yes.
feels like it's real people talking, and this feels like
Yes.
real people talking. I'm like, holy
Because
crap.
when real people are in conversations, they don't always say the perfect thing. They don't always. They very rarely do you get like a nice one liner in an argument with your wife. You know what I mean? Like that just
Yeah.
rarely ever happens. And it's like, yes, I agree. And I want to say that like watch if you should check out Atlanta at some point. It's the same way in terms of the dialogue.
I've seen the first season,
okay.
and I've seen half of season 2. So
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, well, but like to me, that's the same way where characters just
Correct.
feel so realistic.
and probably
No,
even more real in that show than they do, because that show's more real life.
that show is just literally like showing life in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
so good, man. Like anyway, I think Donald to me has like between that and this, it's very clear he's just got a writing voice that just is really down to earth, like and able to. And I think even him as an actor, because I think even when you go into Atlanta having seen Donald as like Troy, there's probably some like how is he gonna play like a low income black Atlanta kid? Like, is that, I've never seen him do anything like that. Everything he's done has been ridiculous and zany and like, silly. And like, he's this black guy that like is a nerd kind of like energy. Right. Like, and that's
Yeah.
kind of who he is, I think, as a person, actually.
Well, I think it's the opposite now, where if you watch Atlanta first, you're like, how could he ever play someone who's goofy?
Exactly. You're like, how could he ever be Troy and Abed in the morning kind of stuff? You know what I mean?
Dude, yeah. And real quick for our listeners, because during all this, I mentioned Atlanta and Community both to Kimberly. And because, and I didn't really mention this, but he's also Uncle Aaron in the Spider-Man live action. He makes an appearance in Across the Spider-Verse.
Yep.
And, I
He's
told her,
Lando.
He's
Calrissian?
Jeez, yeah. He's supposed to
He's
have a show
making a
with that.
movie about that or something?
Or a
Yeah.
TV show or
Okay,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. Who knows at that point? I mean,
Yeah.
Bob Iger's been all over everyone lately, as he should be. But I to put all the listeners out there, if you don't know about the show Community, starring Donald Glover, Joel McHale, Chevy Chase, Allison Brie, who I have a crush on.
What's and then Britta, who I just saw in it. Oh, I forgot to tell you, we're watching The Bear. We're halfway through season 2.
Yep,
she's in that episode with the family dinner episode, which is like, it's such a good episode. It's like an hour long, and talking about again mentioning a place where like people talk like real people, and like a dysfunctional family on screen that feels like a real dysfunctional
so you like
family.
The Bear? Do you like it?
It's very
good.
It's very good.
It's like one of my favorite shows of all time.
The next episode is Forks. We're gonna watch it tonight probably, and I know you've been hyping that up. So.
You've got to get like a pizza or something. Like you got to get your favorite drink and your favorite candy, because and I mean I could hype it up even more, but it's just so well done that you just and even the one you just mentioned with Jamie Lee Curtis in it, and John Barenthal. You're getting these great performances.
Oh man.
And that show is like, if I feel bad for people who have like hard anxiety trying to watch that show, because
it's a lot.
I could see it could really, especially if you have family issues, I could see that show is really hitting you in a lot of hard ways.
And to some degree, it's like if you have family issues, but they're not as bad as this, there's maybe some relief, and you're like, okay, my family isn't this dysfunctional. Like, I know we're tangenting into The Bear, but Jamie Lee Curtis's performance as a mom, who I loved it. She's the mom. She tells everyone not to help her. I don't want help. I'm doing it on my own. And then at the end of the day, she's like, no one appreciates me. Like that's very well, like honestly, borderline personality behavior. That's like it's like how Catherine describes borderline is, I hate you, don't leave me. That's what borderline is. It's I push you away, I pull you back. I push you away, I pull you back. And
I've dealt with that for sure.
Yes. And like she does such a good job of that role. Like and then what is Better Call Saul? He was so good in it too. Like he's like the
the whole thing was like throwing the fork.
Yes,
it's so fucking good, dude.
Oh my god, John Bernthal kills it. I mean, I know he's playing very much a John Bernthal character. You know what I mean? Well, like he fits that kind of loud, violent, outbursty, kind of like unstable. Like there's a little Frank Castle in there, just a little bit.
He is so interesting in the fact Walking Dead's probably the most different, just because his character dies, but he's still not in the show very long in comparison to how long the show is.
No.
But that man has if you ever just want to call someone up for one scene in a movie, they
Yeah.
call John Barenthal, and then he kills it every time.
Yes.
And
Steals the show.
I have the feeling that he doesn't want to be a leading man just because he isn't Punisher, but but that's on TV. I feel like
Yeah.
he could easily be one in a movie, but he's like in Sicario, he's just the guy she picks up at the bar,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
just like he keeps doing that. And then of course, I think it's episode 1 of The Bear, you see that it's John Barenthal.
It's not
And
episode 1. It's a little later that you see
is it?
because they hype up Mikey. And then later on in the show, you finally see Mike, which actually after I didn't realize in the moment that was Mikey. Like because I was kind of imagining Mikey younger, I think like
Yeah.
a lot younger than John Bernthal is in the show. And so like I just at first was like, oh, and then after that scene I was like, oh, that was Mikey. That was their brother, and like we just got a hint of who he was and his personality.
I think I told you this, but I wasn't watching it on Hulu initially last summer. I was watching it in other ways, and I was watching it, and I watched the last episode of season 1 first,
On accident.
and I didn't know
Oh, like the first episode you ever watched was the last episode.
of season 1, which is to me like a golden. It's like
Which
if
one
there's
is that? I'm trying
if
to
there's 10
remind.
commandments at the very end, they open up all the tomato cans,
Oh yeah.
and
Yep,
and you
yep.
see John Barenthal in the episode.
Yes.
The episode starts with like the big long oneer of him like in
Yes.
in counseling, right?
Yes.
And you see like the bear cage at the beginning. Anyways, that's the first episode I saw. And um it's funny because that whole episode tells you everything you need to know about the rest of the season.
Sure. Yeah.
And then when I officially started it a couple months back on Hulu, I watched the first episode. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like, and I kept watching and watching, and then finally at the last episode of season 1, and I watched the episode like, man, okay, well, I guess I saw the end of the season.
But you still enjoyed it. You still
loved it. I loved it, and also it was interesting too because that finale is like it's like a perfect pilot also because it
Sure. Yeah, it
tells
introduces you to all the characters, kind of tells you what their goals are, what they're trying to get to, and like
Well, his
yes.
opening monologue is about why he's there, which is he's there to take over his brother who killed himself. So it's a perfect pilot, which is at the last episode. Anyway, that show is it's a treat because it's short, it's well made, the acting's phenomenal, and ultimately through the chaos, it's a feel good story, which is why I like it. So
it is. It's one that like puts you through the ringer, like in terms of like kind of I guess like empathetic anxiety for your characters. You're just like you're like kind of just squeezing your butthole the whole time, just a little bit. You know
100%.
what I mean?
The sphincters factor is a 10 out of 10.
But then it comes good, and then you're like it's like a cathartic release for like the tension that you had. And I feel like a lot of times, like even like Game of Thrones, it's like you have the tension, and then what you fear happens. Like your worst fear that you were hoping wouldn't happen happens in the plot. Your favorite character dies. You know, they fail their mission in some way or that. This is a show where it's puts you through the ringer, but then it gives you the good ending, essentially.
I agree.
What I mean? And it earns it. I mean, like the cousin, who's gonna play the thing. I didn't like him at first. I mean, he was just abrasive. He was always yelling. He just seemed like an asshole. And now I think he's great. Now I've like really warmed up to him. And like in that episode with the family, like he has that long scene with Britta. I'm sorry, Britta. I can't remember your real name. And like they seem so sweet, but we know they're divorced. You're right. Like, and so like they're just doing such good work of like building up who he is. And even like that whole thing where he like asked for a job from Cicero and he said, well, I'll think about it. And then he told the wife, he gave it to me. And then they had that moment at the dinner where like Cicero like bails him out essentially. And you can just see it's like, he's just like, he's kind of failing through life a little bit, right? Like just kind of failing forward, right? And like, but you have empathy for him now. You kind of realize like why he's such a, asshole sometimes, or like why he, you know what I mean? Like, and so, anyway.
Well, tonight you got to text me after this episode you watch.
Yes, I will.
It's so good, dude. Yeah, I know like that, I had no issue before watching The Bear with his casting as the thing. But after that, I was kind of like, God, that's the best casting out of the whole thing. Because that guy
has a range,
act. He can act so good.
He can be abrasive, loud, yelling, violent, and he can also be vulnerable and insecure and scared and like feeling left out. You know what I mean? Like I just think It's a really well done show, and I think it's almost like it's exactly like you said with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It's a food show that isn't about the food. That's just dressing. It's about families. It's about dysfunction. It's about death and like what the purpose of life is. And grief, like how to deal with grief, especially how to deal with grief of someone that was like problematic to you. You had this super complicated relationship. It wasn't just like your dad that you like have the best relationship with ever, and now you've lost him, so you just got to deal with the loss. It's like you're losing someone that you loved and hated in a way. You know what I mean? That you just had this so complicated relationship, and it's just so good. It's so, even like I love the sous chef, the girl that plays the sous chef. She is another one that just feels like a normal person. She doesn't feel like your typical Hollywood actress,
right?
But she's so good at natural, and she's
good.
so good at that, like kind of younger, like sarcastic, like okay, I guess I'll just do this then, like kind 100%. Of stuff, And she's Anyway, fantastic show.
I can't think of his name, the lead, the bear, but
Carmy, Jeremy Allen White.
Yeah, but that's Gene Wilder's son. And
wait, what? I did not know that.
Well, look at his face.
I mean, I can see it now. I mean,
he looks
Willy
exactly
Wonka.
like his father. He looks exactly like his father. Just cloned himself almost.
He looks like his father in like a supermodel body or bodybuilder body.
Sure, maybe, yeah.
And I'll say the one unrealistic thing about this show is that Carmy never goes to the gym ever, and he has that body. Like he doesn't
genetics.
He wakes up and goes to the restaurant and works till bed and goes to sleep. Like he never goes.
Genetics, baby. Yeah. But just kind of tying back into Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah,
you're right. It's not about the action, and like sometimes they do bottle episodes, right? And one of them is a great one. Not really. It's the counseling, and they use the counseling as a way to go to these other very extreme locations. But it's kind of like
it was almost a compilation video. It was like just little vignette stories that they would come back to counseling and talk about. Yeah.
But the show kind of, to me, ultimately it's like the 7 stages of grief, but like for a relationship.
Sure.
And because it's like, first they're just kind of like cohabitants, roommates, but we start getting really into like they start caring about each other and sex, and then it just keeps getting that. And again, it's so real. And just, I mean, right now, just thinking about it, because one thing about TV shows is that they typically, maybe I'm going to disagree with what I was going to say there. Typically, like a sitcom will take a characteristic and blow it out to 1,000% to make it that's their thing.
Well, it's the Flander, what they call Flanderization. Right?
Sure.
Like from Simpsons, which is like you have a character that acts in a certain way but is actually a full character, and eventually they aren't a full character anymore. They are just their character.
Yes.
The Office is a great example of this. Like the later seasons of The Office, Dwight is just always being Dwight and just Dwight-isms. He's not really the full character that we got to know in the beginning. You know what I mean?
100%. I mean, just kind of putting a layer on it, I feel like Donald Glover's character is someone he is slick and cool because he's Donald Glover, but he is someone who's insecure, and he's someone who needs a blanket wrapped around him. And we get that too with like the parable of like he's checking on his mommy. He's someone who feels deeply.
Yes. But hides it underneath a layer of like he's protecting himself. Yeah.
Yes. And she is someone who is a little more cold and calculating. And I mean, they can both hurt each other very well, but I don't know. I feel like
she's less empathetic than she portrays, and he's more empathetic than he portrays. You know, I think that's what it is, right? Like she pretends to kind of be, and I think he calls her out on this. She pretends to kind of be this like, normal, empathetic, caring person, but she's actually a bit less caring than she portrays. Like, I think like she's trying to fit in with like people that are nice, but she's a little less nice naturally than those people because of shit that's happened to her, right? And he pretends he's more aloof. He pretends like he doesn't care as much about things, but he's actually deeply feeling all the time and like deeply like in tune with his own feelings. Like he's aware of them, but he puts up a wall. Right. Yeah. And so like they're a great opposite in that way. And I think you're right that like this show is like a time like for one, I like that the show is it's not completely linear in that like a bunch of time takes place in between certain episodes. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like and so like you're kind of jumping around to different stages of this relationship. It's not as if this relationship goes through its full steps in a week of episodes or something. But I think you're right that they do such a great job of showing a very natural path for a lot of relationships. It starts with infatuation. It starts with like, bubbly, cute love. We can't keep our hands off each other. We can't stop thinking about each other. Well, and then it isn't like it goes from that directly to just a dysfunctional relationship. It just slowly starts becoming, well, they don't know how to communicate with each other, and they're not communicating with each other. They're not communicating their needs adequately to each other. I need this from you for me to feel stable. I need this from you for me to feel stable in this relationship. They're not doing that, and that leads to miscommunications. That leads to questioning if they're right for each other. That leads to all this stuff, and that like at the end of the show, what kind of even brings them together again is like the mom, Donald Glover's mom, right? Like the last episode is almost full action. It's like the full release of the show. They're just trying to kill each other, right? Like they're just nonstop bullets flying. That last episode feels like kind of what we thought the whole show might be, right? But it earned it because you had all this buildup of the relationship before that. But then like when Donald Glover's mom comes in, and like she basically just like, he just needs to know he's loved, like, or whatever. Like and like that even just like a little bit of understanding him better softens her to him. You know what I mean? And I think it's just a great example of like how relationships can go, and even how I think, versus like something like Marriage Story, which I actually haven't seen because it just sounds depressing, of just like how relationships fail all the time.
It makes you never want to get married, dude. Honestly.
Right. But this to me is nicer because I feel like at the end, I kind of had the feeling like they might still make it if they're alive. They might still be a couple. Like I think they might make it through what they've gone through and still stay together. And I think that's a great example of like a couple going through the normal stages of dysfunction in a relationship and finding a way through it.
I agree. And I want to do a couple parables now to the bear. One, I don't want this show to go on past 3 seasons, just like the bear. I don't want the bear to go on past 3 seasons.
Oh, is the Bear's only going to be 3 seasons?
I don't know. I mean, season 3 comes out in June, but I hope it's the last one. They haven't announced that, so I doubt it is. But
yeah, probably not.
I wish it would just go 3 and be done, because I feel like I feel like its third act is coming up and it should be the last one. Yeah. And then same thing with Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Like I feel like it's I think 3 seasons would be I like this idea of like finite perfect things that's not fucked up, but also a thing that I really enjoy about both of them is that their ability to cast small roles with big actors that kind of bring a sense of like grandiose to the production. It's an old Superman the movie trick, because like they cast Christopher Reeve as Superman and nobody, and they hired Gene Hackman to play Lex Luthor, and Margot Kidder to play Lois Lane, all these other things. And I like in like the Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you have Paul Dano as the neighbor. You have John, he was so good. And he's Paul Dano, like he was the Riddler 2 years ago in Batman. He's not the biggest actor ever, but he's like a very well-respected character actor.
If you watch There Will Be Blood, I mean, he kills it. Yeah, and he's such an interesting character.
I've still never seen it, but
and so what I like about Paul Dano, again, he has the range that he takes roles that are like that are like Oscar bait worthy, like just like that, and then he takes this role where he's just a normal ass dude, and I love the reveal that he's just like this real estate guy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That was just, and he's just such a plain ass guy in this. Like he's relatively unremarkable as a character, and that's kind of what's funny about him, is that you're this has got to be a spy, right? Like this has got to be a secret agent from another company, and then he's just a plain ass dude, just a normal dude. It's great.
But then you have John Turturro, who's also in the same Batman movie.
Oh yeah, he was great.
And then he's like this oligarch dealer guy, so it's kind of like, it's just, I love when shows do that. They bring in veterans to play one specific thing, and it's I don't know. It's like I mean they used to do this like on old sitcoms, like they'd have guest characters, but it was different because like it's like they're there for a punchline, right? They're there for gags for the audience. This is like serious, taking on serious characters and like playing them seriously, I should say. Yes. And anyway, I have respect that, and to double on the bear is like like we said earlier, Jamie Lee Curtis, but Saul Goodman, which is Bob Odenkirk, and then John Barenthal.
Well, even the guy that plays Cicero, like he's been great. He was in Fargo season 1. He's fantastic. He's more of a theater actor in some places.
You talking about the bigger guy?
Yeah,
Who's
yeah, yeah.
Cicero? Is he the
The guy that
basically
loans
like,
them money.
yeah, dude. Well, he's an old 80s, 90s
Yeah.
action guy. Like, have you ever seen the movie Executive Decision? He's so fucking good in that movie.
Okay.
But he's been
he's
like,
great in it.
he's tons of blockbuster movies. Yeah, but he's on the a doctor show now, where he was,
Okay.
Chicago Med or something like that. He's like one of
Okay.
the leads on that. So,
Gotcha.
um,
Oh, sorry,
he's
I have
great.
to interrupt because I just looked this up.
Mhm.
Jeremy Allen White is not related to Willy Wonka or to Gene Wilder. They're not related at all. There's a people.
What?
There's an article from December 14th, 2023, where it's like the
You know how
lead
many
up
people have?
to the stuff, and he's like, "I'm not related to Gene Wilder. I think a lot of people think I am." He's like, "I see the resemblance, but he's like, I'm not."
You
I've
know
never
how
been
many
related to
people
him.
I've told that and like said it with such like determination and like vigor. I've told so many people that, dude.
That's amazing.
Like, you would not believe how many people I've been like, I guess the first thing I say about him is like, that's Gene Wilder's son, right? Like, look how similar they all look.
I mean,
wow.
they look so similar.
They look like they're like his son. I mean,
Because I was looking,
I
I
don't
looked at
believe
Gene
this article.
Wilder, and it's like even on the Wikipedia, he only has one daughter. I'm like,
I don't
that's
believe this. I
weird.
think it's his son.
Could-
I don't
mean,
believe
you
it.
never know.
It's Wikipedia.
No,
I don't believe it.
this is an interview with him where he's.
I don't believe that interview either.
Denying it.
I think he's yeah. I don't believe
It was an Iron Claw like press interview. Anyway,
Well, I can't wait now until I talk to someone, these people, and be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, it's not true." Actually, I'm gonna do it like this. I'm gonna say, "Do you guys know that everyone thinks that's Gene Wilder's son?" And they're like, I'm pretty sure you told us that. I'm like, I would never say something like that.
I would
What?
never say something I wasn't 100%.
I would
sure
never
of.
assume something like that.
Yeah,
That's 100% how that
man,
conversation is going to
it's
go.
So good.
Well, anyway, I love both The Bear and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm excited for
Yes.
season 3 of The Bear. I think it starts in June or July. And I'm really hoping
Yep.
this gets picked up for season 2 because it's one of the best shows on television.
Oh man.
And
I do like though that they left it in a way where if they didn't, it is kind of wrapped up. I mean, it's open ended,
it's sure, yeah.
but like if they left it and it was just like this, succinct story of a relationship that ends bittersweetly. They end up together still, but they might have died, right? Like, but and I think there's poeticness in that. Like if that is just where they leave it, there's a nice poetic ending of sorts to that story. But I agree with you. I very much hope they continue on. I would love if they just continue to make this show about the journey of a relationship. And
Yeah.
because I feel like, again, this season was all about kind of maybe the first year to 2 years of relationship. Like this is a lot of just how relationships go, the ups and downs.
Mhm.
They love each other, then they're annoyed, then they start to dislike, then they kind of go back and forth, whatever. And so I'd love it if the next season was like the next stage of relationship. Maybe they get married. And so like let's deal with like common issues that are later in a relationship's life, like cycle, right?
Sure,
Like that
I
would
agree.
be really fun. Like the in-laws, like having to integrate families and like, how do you do that when like you love this person, you don't necessarily love everyone that's related to them. And how do you manage that?
Well, her dad's a bomb waiting to happen. You know what I'm saying?
Say
like
what?
her dad's a bomb waiting to happen in terms of appearing
Oh,
and
yeah.
throwing a wrench into everything in some way.
Yes. They kept alluding to him, but
Oh,
they
yeah.
never really even detailed like what their issues were.
Yeah.
Like they never really get into why she doesn't like talking to him a lot.
Yeah. And what's funny about this also is I think, and we talk about how real the show is. The show is super real when it comes to the relationship and the dialogue.
Yeah.
But funny enough, the spy stuff is like the most unreal stuff in terms of like,
yeah.
well, in terms of like, they make so many bad, dumb mistakes.
Yes.
Like I don't think for a second they would actually survive one day.
Right. Yeah.
And they're running around through the neighborhoods, like through crowds, like they're
Right.
just the most
Yes.
inconspicuous spies ever. And
Yes.
that's what's so interesting is that how it all works. Because again, it's good, and that's another example. We don't care about it so much because we care about what's happening to them. We don't care about how this
Yes.
reality. It's like,
No, I
how many people do they run through?
You're right. I do think one thing about the show that is fascinating and is interesting to think about is like, how does the spy system work? Because they're always kind of questioning that. Like, who is this people that keep texting us? Like,
Yeah, I wonder if
do they
Hi-Hi is
want
an
us to
AI.
succeed together, or do they
Yeah.
want us to fail? Like, because like I did like the part how like it kind of fed into their conflict. The AI would like like send them, like it would tell on each other, right? Like it would tell on them, like it was basically trying to incite in like conflict with them. And I do think that was interesting. I like the other couple they met, like in just terms of trying to figure out like the whole deal with this job, this spy stuff. It isn't realistic, but it's fun. I'll say
It's
that.
fun, but every episode's great. But like the helicopter drive back, and he's just kind of like
After
covered
they
in
do that
blood,
mission for
and
that couple.
and he's so frustrated, and he's just kind of like, But I love like even how they're shit talking them when they're all like at the end of the day, and they're kind of like,
Yes.
"What's with that? Like, why did he say it
They're
like
so
that?"
weird.
Yeah, but it's so good. The dialogue and the performances are so great. But
Even I love the fact that like it was like, which I feel like I've recognized in life, is like you're a couple and then you find this other couple, and you're like, oh wait, we match up on all these areas, we could be best friends. And then you go to that first time, and you're like, they're weirdos, they're freaking psychos, and like you're like you're trying to believe they're still cool because you want friends. You know what I mean? And then you're like, what the fuck was with those guys? You know what I mean? It's great. It's great. And it's
so good.
All these situations feel so mundane to real life. You just package them inside a spy show, and it just works so well. It works so well.
It does. It's fun.
And that goes back to what we always say about like even cinema, classic Hollywood. So many of the stories are the same, like just stories of triumph, stories of realizing your potential, or like this classic coming of age stories are all essentially the same story, just with different wrappings on it. But like that's the best movies. We tell the similar stories of triumph, of pain, of grief, of loss, of love, but we just put it in different wrappings and kind of look at it in different ways. And like it works. There's something about humans that we connect so much with, that like that just mundaneness or that normalcy. I don't know. It's an interesting phenomenon about like how Hollywood just tells the same stories over and over again with different perspectives, but it works. You know what I mean?
It does work. I think it's a great way to end this episode.
Yeah.
And if our listeners haven't been convinced yet, go watch it. Go watch The Bear.
Give more views to it so we can get a season 2 and 3.
I would love it. Daniel, how can listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail and let us know what you thought of Mr. and Mrs. Smith and The Bear, because this was it turned into a half Mr. and Mrs. Smith, half The Bear show, and I'm not mad about it. I take no grievance with that. So let us know what you thought of Mr. and Mrs. Smith or The Bear at bit.ly/241mail.
And if you can't hit us up at our Bitly, you can always find us in the comment section below, youtube.com/241studios. Everyone, thank you so much for watching the episode. It's episode 196 on our road, our pathway, our destiny to episode 200. I'm excited to also, because I keep hearing, our listeners don't know yet what episode 99 and 200 is. We do. I keep seeing a lot of articles about these two movies, and I'm excited to revisit them, and I'm excited to talk to you both.
Yes.
You and Bruce. Yes. About these. And so we're on the pathway. Hopefully we'll have some good episodes in between then. And I'm excited for
hopefully talk about Shogun soon.
I'd feel confident talking about it next week or the week after. And
there's 3 episodes out now, and so even was it 8 total? I want to say.
I don't know. I know it's a limited series. I know that.
God, I hope it's not. Like that. This is another one. Like, man, just give us a few more seasons, please. I'm sure there's enough story to tell here. Because I will say, like, even 3 episodes in, it's going relatively slow in terms of just like, it's not like a bunch of time is taking place in the show so far. There's only been a few days that have gone by since the show started, but like essentially like in episode 3, the whole episode is like traveling to a boat, like getting to a dock, but it's so intense and so good. And there's so much going on. Like it's just quality prestige television. You know what I mean? A++ writing, A++ production design, A++ acting. Where'd the English guy come from? I feel like I've never seen him in anything. And his voice is so like pleasantly raspy. And like, he's a really good actor. And I'm like, where did this guy come from? I feel like he's going to get a lot more work after this show. But
he looks familiar.
The sailor, the engine, the guy, he looks a little like Tom Hardy to me. In some shots, he's got a little bit of that, like bearded Tom Hardy, but
maybe. But he looks familiar. But no, I'm excited to kind of keep pushing through and I'm
Yes.
curious to see kind of where it all ends up. Anyway, my name is Donovan Thompson,
I'm Daniel Wingfield.
and we have spoken.